I'm Loree Lipstein from Thread Strategies. We are a consulting firm that works with small nonprofits specifically around fundraising, building capacity around the development department. We're a team of 7. A lot of us are located in the Washington, D.C. area, which is why we work so often with the Catalog for Philanthropy, but we are have teammates spread out across the country, and so this is a fun twist on Catalog events to be able to welcome people from across the country virtually today. So our topic that you all are here for is talking about how to keep donors engaged through these challenges of COVID-19 and what you can do around messaging and virtual engagement to keep people connected to you when you can't do the things that we're used to doing. So let's jump right in. Just a quick agenda. I always start almost every training with a quick review of the donor cycle just to make sure everyone's on the same page about the steps of fundraising. And then we'll talk about some of the pivots that the pandemic has required of us and how to get creative around cultivating and given these circumstances, some top tips on messaging right now, and then how to make sure that this all gets put together into an intentional strategy. I will try to make sure we've got time at the end for Q&A, but again, please feel free to kind of ask questions on the way along. So real quick, I'm sure this is not new to anyone, but just so that we're level setting and we're all on the same page, all donors, all funders, whether it's an individual, a foundation, a corporation, go through this cycle in their process of getting to know your organization and then eventually making a gift and then returning to your organization to continue making a gift. Here's a different way to just kind of look at it in a little bit more of a continuum. And so I find it's always helpful to be focused, to think about what step of the process you're in as you're working on securing funding, and then make sure that you haven't skipped a step and that you're being intentional about each step. So at the beginning, you need to identify potential funders that are a good fit for you. This is a really, it sounds straightforward, but it's a really important step. If you skip over this, you may waste a lot of time trying to recruit and secure a funder that was never aligned with you. And so taking the time to really research who you're looking at and really making sure they have the ability to give the belief in your work, that you have aligned values, and that there's some sort of way to make contact with them is just as important as making an ask. And it's a step to not be skipped. And then spending time getting to know your potential funders and building the relationship before you ask for a gift is really important. And then the step of asking is a very distinct step, and often I talk to fundraisers or board members who get stuck in the cultivation stage and don't realize that they have not made a distinctive ask and are wondering why this potential donor is not giving yet. And then stewardship, which is my favorite part of fundraising, but often we get so happy that the money came in, we get kind of hurried back to the beginning for the next donor, and we forget this important part of really building the relationship with our current donors. And I'll say in the pandemic times especially, this step of stewarding your current community is extra important. Your best chance or your highest priority should be first and foremost keeping the donors that you have during economically challenging times or times of disaster like this. You want to keep your community first and then work to build more, bring more people into your circle, but that's going to be harder in times like this. So first and foremost, don't lose the people that already care about you and are already you've already done all the work to bring in and secure a gift from in the past. So what are some of the ways that that the pandemic has affected that donor cycle? None of this is new to you all either, but again, just kind of level setting conversation. Our team thought through some of the ways that things have been different along each step of this process, and I'm sure you guys have plenty of bullets to add under each one, but I'll just go through a few things that are on our minds as we're thinking about then how to get more creative. So a plus actually might be that you have more time to do research online and use some more of the online tools that you've always intended to use, but are out in the field and traveling and moving about more often and have kind of less time for being on the computer and digging in. So it's not all bad. You could actually be spending some more time doing some research right now on your donors and prospective donors. You, of course, can't make an introduction from an in-person first experience, which is a challenge. There's less opportunity for one-to-one interactions with new donors when you're doing events online versus if you were in a room and having a breakfast and you could kind of make your way around the room and bump into each person and say hi. It's a little bit harder to do that one-on-one interaction like this. If I was in a training room with you all, I could say hi, we could chat during a break, and it's a little bit harder to do it this way. And then just acknowledging that in general, people, our funders, everyone has a little bit less of an attention span right now. People are dealing with a lot of things that are distracting them from what they might otherwise have time to do as extracurricular, activities such as getting involved in a nonprofit. And so just recognizing that people might have less space in their life right now for extras as they're teaching their children and trying to work full time and potentially have families that are family members who are having health challenges. So as you're designing your messaging, and as we get into those things, keep in mind that the people you're talking to, their attention spans might be shorter. And so you want to get in there and make an impression quickly and be functional with the different things that you're sharing with your community. Cultivation, again, not having in-person events, that's a huge part of cultivating, is often being in person, meeting someone for lunch or coffee or stopping by their office, having them come out and volunteer or see your program firsthand by taking a tour. All of these things are, off the table in this moment, and so we're relying a lot on written material, which can feel like it gets repetitive. But that's, those things are really impacting the cultivation stage. So it's important to think about how we can cultivate in different ways. Asking, often for big gifts, we recommend asking in person. You can certainly still set up a Zoom meeting to ask in person, but it's a little bit different than casually sitting down with somebody and having a kind of deep one-on-one conversation about an investment they're going to make in your nonprofit. There's not the chance to sell tickets to something as a revenue generator, as an ask. If you're trying to sell sponsorships to corporations or individuals to your work, sponsoring something online just have a little bit less visibility than a big giant community event. And then there's the competition of the fact that all nonprofits are feeling urgency in the same moment. And so there are a lot of urgent asks competing at the same time. And so that just makes the asking more challenging. And then this last category, often we do try to steward donors in person by having them visit the office or getting together in person. There's less opportunity for that direct interaction with constituents right now, and we're relying a lot on kind of digital content, digital assets for recognition. How can you list a donor's name on your social media or in your newsletter? But the opportunities for that are a little bit more narrow than recognizing a big donor at an event or having them out to meet with one of your constituents or things like that. So again, no surprises here to anyone, but I do think it's helpful to think about the challenges that we're facing as it falls into the donor cycle. And that way you can try to creatively think about something different that you can do within each of these categories instead of getting overwhelmed that like the whole thing is just different and off. A few other notes about the pandemic and philanthropy and changes that we're seeing in the work that we're doing with our nonprofit partners, as well as the many forums and conversations and gatherings and expert convenings that we've been part of, and all of the reading that we're doing of material that's coming out. So a few kind of top takeaways. The financial impact of funders varies greatly. There are companies that are thriving right now. There are companies that are struggling right now. There are people who are struggling right now, and there are people who are doing, just fine, that their stocks are not impacted, their job is not impacted, and in fact, they're probably spending less money, discretionary money, because they're not traveling and they're not doing a lot of the extra activities that they usually do. So just know that there's a huge variety in the experience that different kinds of funders are having right now. And it's worth taking the time to really try to understand the latest about your partner or your prospect that you're thinking about before you call them or before you reach out to them. If you can understand that they are in a challenging place right now, this might be a time to just focus on cultivation and stewardship and not be making an ask of them in 2020. It is worth maintaining the partnership in 2020 with a top past funder, and not making an ask if you know it's not the right time, but not dropping them from your inner circle, and then having them come back stronger in the future than saying, okay, this person we know can't give right now, so we're just not going to call them for the rest of the year, and then next year we'll get back to them. Don't lose the relationship with anyone who can't give right now. I read, I don't even remember when, a great testimonial about a very high net worth individual who had been impacted severely by the Madoff scandal years ago, and could not give to her philanthropic commitments in that first year where she had experienced financial ruin from that. And she made a very distinct comment that there were some nonprofits who knew that happened to her, invited her as their guest anyway to still come to whatever activities they were having as if she were still their major donor. And then there were some who she didn't hear from. And probably those nonprofits thought they were being respectful by not contacting her, but she felt very dropped. And she said as she made her way back from that, which within a few years she was a top donor, major donor again, that she remembered who treated her the same no matter what the position was, and kept her as part of the nonprofit community, and who she had not heard from. And those organizations did not come back into her giving circle. It's the same situation now. Some of your funders might be struggling. Do not drop them. Continue treating them like they are very important funders to you. Be sensitive around when you would make an ask. If it's not for another year, that's okay. Some funders have accelerated their annual giving to get dollars out in response to the great need, especially in March, April, May. We've heard from some corporate funders that have tapped their entire 2020 giving in those 3 months. You've probably read about plenty of foundations who have been trying to accelerate giving and getting it out the door. It's wonderful to hear that funders have tried to respond to that need in that moment. I think in that moment, we thought that it would not be this ongoing, all through 2020, same kind of moment. And perhaps there would have been a different decision about spreading that out at the time. But we do know now that we're in a place where things aren't likely to change drastically for the rest of the year. But know that some of your funders may have already given their 2020 funding that they have to give. So the fall might be a slower time of giving this year than we've seen in the past. Of course, nobody knows. This is unprecedented, but that's something to just think of and potentially be aware of. Many funders are focusing first on their current relationships, which is back to my point of stewardship. You should also be focusing on retaining your current funders first. Funders are thinking this way, like, let's take care of, put on our house's oxygen mask before we go out and find new nonprofits that we can help support. You want to be there. When they're thinking about you, you should be thinking about them. And actually don't make it hard for them to be thinking about you. Be proactively reaching out to them and in touch and communicating your needs, and know that the people who have cared about you the most are you're still the first one on their mind. So make sure that you're working hard to retain them. And the interest we've seen in new funding, so once those funders, whether it's an individual, foundation, or corporation, we're hearing similar things from all different revenue streams, funding streams. Those who can move beyond their current community and have some extra funding to allocate, we are hearing that they are most interested in funding the topics of the day. COVID-19 relief and or racial justice. And of course, those intersect in many ways. So they have seemed to be generous on broadly defining those areas of work. And so there's many different ways that you might fit into those two buckets. But if you truly don't and you truly can't, I would never recommend mission creep for the sake of funding. But you should just know that in recruiting brand new funders at this point in time, those are the topics that most people are looking to when they're thinking about starting a new funding relationship with a nonprofit. Again, if you don't fit into those and that makes you feel a little bit of despair, circle back to the point above about really, really focusing on your current funders right now and making sure that you keep that community with you through this year. So all that to say, relationship building is more important than ever. And that I hope that it stays in your head as the theme throughout everything else that we talk about today. It's all about relationships.
Loree, speaking of that, someone has a question here. I'll read it out to you. About fundraising dinners. They would like to bring speakers to dinners and sell tickets for some of their higher level donors who would be interested in an intimate event with direct access to speakers. Do you think this still works virtually or something that should be retired until after COVID?
I have seen some of the virtual fundraising dinners work with charging money, but I will say that it really does hinge on access to the point of the question. If you have someone that you have access to that can be kind of an exclusive type virtual experience, I have seen a strong response to that kind of thing. If you want to sell tickets to hear from your students in your program, it's not that people don't want to hear from them, but they are less likely to spend money for something like that than a big name speaker that you can't otherwise have access to. We did an event with a partner of ours with a woman who was one of the speechwriters for Obama. It was wildly successful. That's not someone that people would usually just be able to interact with and ask questions to, and the demand for it was very high. And in this case, the benefit of the virtual part is that people around the country could all participate, and you're not limited to the geographic area of if the dinner was in person. But I have not seen the same level of enthusiasm for an event dinner otherwise that doesn't include kind of someone with exclusive access like that. Not that people aren't interested, but the ability or interest in paying for it is what varies.
Loree, I also saw that some nonprofits for higher tickets deliver them dinner.
Yeah, I was going to say that too. You can, I've seen dinner, I've seen wine with a sommelier then is on the, the virtual part. I've seen a whiskey tasting. I've seen a cocktail class. All of those things seem to also be, because they're kind of mixing in-person engagement at home with virtual engagement, but those are very cost-intensive ways to do a virtual event. So especially, I know this is a conference for small nonprofits. I'm going to assume everyone on the line is a small nonprofit. Really weigh the cost benefit of that, not just in securing the items, but the staff time to drive around and deliver all of those items. And then if some people are not local, you're shipping it, and what's the logistics of shipping it. Make sure that that's going to pay off more than potentially just trying to focus one-on-one on outreaching to those same people and really just connecting with them personally. I'm not saying it can't. I've seen it, but I have only seen larger nonprofits doing things like that have more resources. So I would just say that for our small nonprofit, just really think through all of the levels of cost, including the staff time it would take to put that together. Great questions, guys. Thank you. This slide I'm just going to spend a brief minute on because I usually really advise keeping your eye on the state of philanthropy and looking at the Giving USA data every year as it comes out. And it just recently came out for 2019. This is still very important data, but of course, so much has changed from 2019's data to 2020. But I do want to point out just kind of the breakdown of giving every year in this country, and I do not expect that to change drastically through the pandemic. Corporations have always given the smallest percentage, and we would not expect this to be a time that corporations are going to raise the amount of money they're giving. I do think foundations are likely to see increase by the time next year's Giving USA comes out. They seem to have really stepped up right now. And that probably would be a trade-off with how much giving we see by individuals once you kind of break, add back up to 100% next year. I think that's where I believe we'll see the biggest change. But again, I don't think foundations are going to replace individuals for how much money is being given, and certainly corporations are not likely to rise anywhere to the top. So when you're thinking about your strategy and where you're going to invest time in different funding streams throughout the pandemic, don't forget this bigger picture of where philanthropic dollars come from in this country annually, and where the opportunity lies for funding. So where do we focus your attention now? Again, retention of your current donors. I can't say that enough. Strong cultivation and stewardship should be your top priority. Also, focus your attention on raising money. Do not stop asking. I'm sure this is not the first time you've heard this at this point during the pandemic, but it can't be said enough. Even knowing that this is a message that's pretty pervasive out there, I'm still coming across board members in particular who say, it's not the right time, we shouldn't be asking, it feels wrong. All the studies show that in other economically challenging times, that the organizations who stopped asking money altogether had the hardest time coming back, if they could come back at all. So do not stop your development plan. If your plan was to have an appeal in September, plan for your appeal in September. Just think about your messaging and the way and who you're approaching and how, so that it fits into the times we live in, but do not skip it entirely. And we're here to talk about fundraising today, but it's worth just saying and noting that your work is what people are funding. Your impact is what people are funding. And so also continuing to work with your program teams, if most people here are development folks, to make sure that you understand the way the program is being delivered now, virtually or whatever pivots have happened, and that you can communicate that impact to your donors. It's a very important part of messaging, that you are doing the work in some way, shape, or form, even if it's virtually and it looks different than it's ever looked before, and that you're communicating that to your funders. It's hard for them to fund something that's not happening at all. So keep your work going in some way, shape, or form. And if it's truly, truly, truly not possible for some reason, then that's a bigger conversation to have with your board and, thinking about the future. But it's hard to ask for funding for something that's totally stopped. So get creative with the work and keep yourself relevant.
Loree, someone had a question before you move on here. Don't donors get annoyed being asked all the time? Is it more of a focused ask and not a general one?
So I'm not sure if the question is asked all the time, like by your nonprofit, or asked all the time because they're on lists of 10 nonprofits. There's two different ways to look at that. I'm going to focus my answer on you feeling like you're asking too much within your organization. I would say that you want to be strategic about the asks you're making. So when we say don't stop fundraising, it doesn't mean every single week you should just be asking for money over and over again in the same way. It means don't abandon your development strategy and your development plan. So if there are 2 times a year that you have a standing appeal, make sure that those appeals happen. And then use some of the techniques we'll get to around messaging to be really compelling and like the question said, targeted in how you're asking for money. But my point is to not abandon the ask, but I also definitely do not mean to put an ask out every week in a generic way that just says support us, or we're having hard times, and like that's just the message over and over and over again. That will not be very effective. And if you're worried about they're getting asked by everyone, like, we said in that chart at the beginning, that there's a lot more competition in the same moment right now. You just need to have faith that the people who've cared about your work are listening to your message when you send it. And it is a time where people are probably unsubscribing from some things at this point, but that's to focus on the things that they care most about. So if you lose a few people along the way, be okay with that. They're probably not the people that were closest to you anyway. And again, keep your focus on those that are really care about you. And donors, we've seen it happening in the last few months. The organizations they care the most about, they are truly concerned about how you're doing, how the work is continuing, how the staff is doing. You know, they want to hear from you. They want to know those things, and they want to know how they can help. So you can't I mean, your communication needs to be strategic, but it also needs to be regular. Don't worry. I doubt anyone on here is communicating too much. It's usually not the problem. So a few ideas around on creatively cultivating donors in a virtual way, and like the quote on the right says, nurturing, nurturing, and nurturing. I mean, that's what this time is all about right now. And we try to think here, give you some tips here about thinking beyond the Zoom. You know, Zoom is obviously a part of all of this, but phone calls. Don't underestimate how valued of picking up the phone is, especially now in the time of Zoom, as Zoom fatigue is real, that just picking up the phone and calling your donors means a lot, especially the older donors. Your direct mail average donor age is 69 to 73. I have certainly been impressed how older people have picked up on Zoom. I've seen it all kinds of ways I never thought I would, but don't underestimate how much that age group would still appreciate a phone call. And to be honest, I appreciate phone calls right now. So, you know, don't forget about that tried and true tool of the phone, and focus that conversation first and foremost on how they're doing, building the relationship, just learning what's new and different for them. And no doubt they're going to be asking you what's new and different for your program and how things are going. And there'll be a natural opportunity to share what the organization needs at this time. Handwritten notes in the mail. I mean, people are not on vacation. They're in their house. They're checking their mailbox every day. Sending something in the mail really stands out right now, especially if it's something that's not just another solicitation. I think I call it out somewhere else in this program, but when I was getting right back on this call from my new computer, I was just in time to hear a shout out from, I think Sarah from City Year is on this group. I think I saw her name pop up, and I want to give a shout out to City Year for doing a really cool mailed cultivation piece. They sent postcards that were like you could color in. So it was like an activity, and then you can send that postcard forward to somebody else to say hi, and I miss you, and how is life right now during the pandemic. And so it was something really, really different that showed up in my mailbox, and it wasn't asking me for money, and it was an activity I could do, and it stood out from everything else, and it wasn't digital. When a time where you can't wait to turn off your computer at the end of the day, it was a very welcomed different piece to receive. So that is, try to think about how to creatively use mail and utilize your full team. So if phone calls sound overwhelming because you're a team of one, don't forget you have a board of directors. Don't forget your program staff, can pitch in and do some things right now. Do you have some key volunteers who can't come to your office right now but love you and would love to do something to help out? Think broadly about who can be involved in whatever creative cultivation piece you come up with. So build your team. And don't be afraid to ask people what they need, and listen and pivot based on what you hear from them. And keep the long game in mind. So I said that earlier, there's some people who are not going to be able to give this year at all, who are not going to be able to give the same way that they've given. Don't drop them. Continue building the relationship. Fundraising is always a long game, and especially in difficult times like this. It will come back to you in spades when you treat people the same throughout this situation, whether or not they can give the way you've treated them when they were major supporters of the organization, or even mid-level supporters of the organization. It's worth it. Don't forget that this is a temporary, even it's longer than we wanted, it's still temporary, and these relationships are really long-term. And then if you're doing something virtual, still try to make a personal invitation. I'm sorry, I don't know what I meant by use this when I wrote that bullet, but I did mean that the point here is that even when you're doing virtual gatherings, that you can still get personal about your invitation. Oh, phone call, that's what I meant. You could have your board make phone calls that share that there's a virtual event coming up, and that I'm a board member of XYZ. I'm just calling to say thank you for supporting us. and in the past, you're such an important member of our community. Wanted to make sure you saw we're hosting a forum next week with our students, and really hope you can join. So even when you're doing a virtual gathering, try to use the phone or a postcard in the mail. That timing's a little harder for that. Just try to use other methods to still be personal about the invitation to your virtual gathering. To Laura's question and point earlier, again, moving to kind of beyond virtual and being a little bit more hybridly interactive, you could create and deliver items to people's home. It might be part of a virtual experience, like wine for an event, or it might just be something you've dropped off for them to enjoy, like a piece of artwork from youth, or an organization I worked with did branded candles that they dropped off. They kind of said, "Thank you for being the light in this dark time." It was kind of mission aligned with what they were doing. Even, it wasn't dropped off, it came in the mail, but that postcard example I just shared is just another item, something that came to my home and was different than being, on the computer. Think about utilizing your natural assets. So if you are an art-based organization, can you make Zoom backgrounds out of the art that the people in your program are focused on at this time, and offer that up to people? If you're a sport program, can you create a workout challenge that you offer your community to feel like they're doing something together? We've seen some of those virtual 5Ks in the same way, where it's 1 week that you could do your 5K, but there's some kind of scavenger hunt like elements to it, where you feel like you're participating in something with a group, even though you're doing it on your own or just with your family in your neighborhood. Can you take your program and go live on Facebook or Instagram? We have a partner that, nonprofit partner, that part of their mission is meditation based. And so they're delivering daily live meditations on Facebook. So can you take something that's already natural to your program and think of a creative way to still utilize that very mission aligned element with your community? Might still be somewhat virtual, but something that gets people engaged with you beyond, again, a Zoom forum. And can you make that interactive? So this is also what we had just talked about, but can you have a chef leading a cooking session where people at home have gathered their own ingredients? I don't know if you all have seen, but Airbnb experiences, which used to be like, with Airbnb's new thing in the last few years, where not only can you book an apartment if you go to Lisbon, Portugal, but you can book a tour or a pork tasting class, or with locals who put up their own things. Well, a lot of these experiences have gone virtual. I've seen some really cool chef-led ones where you get the ingredient list on your own, you get on at this time, and it's a small group, and the chef leads you through something, and you're cooking, and you can ask questions and things like that. You could do something similar as a fundraiser or as a cultivation event, where you are, it's ultimately dialing into still a Zoom to have the content delivered to you, but there's something that you're doing at home that's interactive, and it feels a little bit more like you're participating than you're just sitting and looking at the computer and listening. So, few ideas there about how to get as creative as we can with the limited options that we have right now. I'll just pause for 1 second. Laura, are there any other questions kind of along the lines of these ideas, or has anyone been sharing great ideas of what they've done in the chat?
There's one question, just like overall recommendations for adapting galas to virtual.
Keep them short. Your gala used to be hours long with lots of elements. Now attention span for a gala is very short. If you can still have some sort of speaker or some sort of kind of program presentation that is catchy and different, that's very helpful. Again, you could do the drop-off dinner or drop-off wine, but that's very labor and cost intensive. I've also been on a few virtual galas where they did not drop off anything like that, and it was still fine, but it was short. There was a very distinct program that was like a video with the mission, a few speakers, some awards, and sometimes they've included a live appeal where people are making their, we're trying to get to a certain amount of money in this moment. It really helps if you're going to do something like that, if you've got some strong plants already in the audience who can get that going. It's also, the ones I've seen have been using professional MCs for for the whole thing, really. It really makes a difference. Some local newscasters have been very helpful. There's also companies of kind of live auctioneers for nonprofits and things like that that are very good at hosting this kind of event. It's very effective. I've seen that a lot of those galas are still encouraging people to dress up and trying to make it fun, that you do get in your black tie attire and you have your glass of wine poured, and that there is a virtual toast and that people are feeling like it's special. And so those are the things I've seen working well. I mean, well is relative right now. And I will say, I think, just personally, I think people's attention spans for that are going to just keep dropping off as there's more and more of them. So if you do not already have a virtual gala planned, and it has to be that because it's planned and it's in process, I wouldn't necessarily say that this is a time to be adding that kind of event as a new thing. As you're looking at your strategy for closing your budget gaps this year, I wouldn't say to start out with a virtual gala if it's not something that you're building on from the past, which I'm sure nobody really is, but just had to say it. Anything else, Laura?
Yeah, how would you recommend including a silent auction component to a virtual gala?
You'll need to use some software for that. OneCause is one that I like. There's plenty of other software options, but they are already set up to have auctions on your cell phone and online. Often organizations are doing that even when there are events in person, so that people can be sitting at their table and using their phone to make bids and things like that. And so I'd say that's a plus in the sense that those technologies were already set up to be really effective in a virtual setting before we needed them to be. So again, OneCause just happens to be the one I've used a lot. Auction 360 is maybe another one, but there's plenty of platforms out there who do that, and I would say that using one of those is important, but those also cost money. So if your auction is 10 items, you might not need to have the auction or be investing in software. So that would be something to either kind of go in on and really do a larger auction with higher end items, or maybe forgo the auction this year and save some strong items for next year. It's also, I'm seeing it's hard. Traditionally, a lot of auction items are restaurant certificates, hotel stays, vacation homes, trips. Those are the things that often sell the best in auctions anyway. And those are things that are hard to both procure right now and for people to be excited about buying, because it's unclear when and if and how you could use all of those things. So again, if you're not necessarily already in the process of an auction, that might not be the best use of time this year. This slide is just thinking about, again, trying to help you think outside the box of Zoom. So where else could you be getting a boost right now for that ultimately can play back into fundraising? Jim Collins has this great kind of quote about finding your oxygen canisters. What are the things that can help you that you might not have thought about? So media coverage and ad placement. Is this a good time to be developing a relationship with a local newspaper or station? We have one nonprofit partner right now who is developing a brand new relationship with a local newspaper here in DC, and the paper is going to do a whole thing on them in September as part of a series on a topic that they're trying to cover locally anyway. I don't want to give too much away because I don't think it's any of it's out yet, but that is going to tremendously help that nonprofit to be in front of new people, potentially attract new donors, certainly shine a light on their work to their current donors, and again, while everybody's kind of stuck in place, this might be a great time to be reaching out to a local media outlet and spending the time to build a partnership up about covering your work and being part of what you're doing. Can you also partner with another nonprofit and do something unique and co-brand and co-plan something that is both mission aligned for both of you and gets you recognized among both your communities for doing something different and unique? How can you use pro bono consultants and summer interns? And there's a lot of people who do have time on their hands right now. There's, we're kind of in this dichotomy where people are either feel like their head's going to pop off because, again, they got their kids at home and they're trying to do their job and they've got 10,000 things. And there's some people who unfortunately have lost their jobs and are very talented in a number of places, of areas, and don't have work and, really want to keep busy and to give back. And so can you think of ways to be utilizing pro bono support and that would allow you to do some more of these other interesting things that we talked about? I talked about the labor intensity of dropping off things and to keep that in mind about staff time, but potentially that's a place you could use a bunch of summer interns or high school students who can drive but don't have their summer jobs, and give them a volunteer job. And so as you think about all these different things, also think about the creative ways of who you can call on to help you. And then, of course, technology. There's so much interesting technology that keeps coming out to help us through these pandemic times. I know it can be difficult to stay on top of it, but ask each other. This is a great way you can ask each other what you've found and what's working and how you're using it to communicate with each other. I mean, with your constituents. This is just one example of many, but there's a great platform called CauseVid that we've recently found and really love, where it allows you to record video messages one-on-one or to the whole community. And so again, it's digital, but it's trying to get more personal in delivering a message to someone's inbox than that same old email. So keep your eye out for things like that. The Chronicle for Philanthropy often covers interesting things. Talk to each other. The catalog is a great resource for interesting new virtual technology resources. And if anyone has anything you've used, throw it into the chat for each other now.
Wait, Loree, what was the name of it? Someone just asked.
CauseVid, CAUSEVID, like almost like cause video, but it's called CauseVid. And my information is going to be at the end of this presentation. So, I mean, for any question I don't get to or anything like that, I can make an introduction to the CauseVid people or send you an example of one that we just did. So please feel free to reach out to me after for more information as well. Okay, so messaging. Few tips on how you're messaging right now. Be transparent and honest, but not doomsday. So there's a happy medium to strike here. It's definitely okay to be honest and say, we've really been impacted by what's happening, and this is how. But keep donors' confidence. Don't make it sound like, and we're going to be closed next month if you don't give us money. You want to be honest about, we need to make up this gap from not having our gala or losing earned revenue or not being able to do our performances if you're a performance organization. But you don't want it to make it sound like if you don't give to us tomorrow, we won't be here at the end of the year. Donors want to have confidence in you and they want to support you. And they want to know that they're helping bridge that gap that's very real. But it's a fine line to walk between being honest and not being totally doomsday. So check yourself on your messaging as you're writing, and see if you're kind of between those two lines. Be consistent with your messaging and communication. This is a time where weekly or bi-weekly, certainly at least monthly updates are hugely important to your community. The people who care about you still care about you, and they know that things are different for everyone right now, and they genuinely want to hear what's happening with you and your programs. And when you're silent, they have no idea. Are you still providing services? How are you providing services? Where have you had to let staff go? What's happening? So don't go silent. Be really consistent with your messaging and the timing of it. And when you send that out, regularly, include a mix of information. So updates on your programming, maybe helpful tips of things that you found that you want to pass on, and be both concise and engaging with your community. Be sincere. So don't just be sending a solicitation. Just back to the point someone earlier said, what about asking too much or asking all the time? Don't just ask, but show that you really care about your community and that this community is in it together. Be sincere about your messaging. Donors can see through it when you're not. Keep building excitement. So it might feel like a time where we're really dragging right now and not a lot feels exciting, but don't forget to kind of keep people focused on what happens on the other side of this and what their gift makes possible in terms of impact. Even if that impact right now is still kind of building to its ultimate impact because of the differences we've had to make, keep building excitement for your work and the impact that their gift makes. And then as you're thinking about how to message, be creative with how you're delivering that message. Create videos, tell stories, focus on, that's not different than other times. It just works even better now to stand out from the crowd. I mean, I'm sure you all are on just as many email lists as I am as with nonprofits, and you see what is kind of the same old, and then every now and then you see something that really pops out and is different, and that's what your donors or your community members are seeing too. So when it's a video, when you focus on a story and you've highlighted a person, we all feel the extra need for human connection right now, and so that really resonates. Okay, my last piece as we wrap it up is setting this all together with an intentional strategy. So I just shared a lot of ideas, and ideas are really exciting, but if you don't write it down and make a process behind it, this can feel both overwhelming and not go anywhere. So part of the essence of strategy is choosing what not to do. Again, I wanted to present a lot of different thoughts, that you should not be doing all of those things. So first and foremost, sit down and decide what you will do and what you will not do. It helps if you know how much money you need to raise to achieve your budget this year and how you can tell the story of that. So if you know you have $30,000 left to raise as you build your appeal, be honest. We need to raise $30,000 by September 30th. And that money will allow us to continue our programming XYZ. Be specific, and it'll help you set your strategy when you know how much money you're even trying to raise. That example is for a big appeal, but the same for if you're going in to talk to a major donor. If you're going to talk to one of your largest donors, they want to hear, well, what do you actually need right now, dollar-wise? And what will those dollars do? What is the story behind those dollars? So getting that set in your mind and writing it down on paper will help you set your strategy for how to actually achieve it. Think about who your team will be, who's going to help you. Don't go at this alone. Be creative. Like I said, who are going to use your board members? So are you going to use people from the program team? Are you going to use one of your constituents who's, home and really appreciating the extra support you're providing and wants to help be a voice about that? And who are the different segments you're communicating to? So who are the people you want to reach out to personally, one-on-one, and really have a more personal conversation and potentially make a more personal ask to? And then once you segment them out, who's left in your community, and how might you divide that larger audience in half, even just in half? These are the people who gave last year, these people who haven't given. These are the people who care about our after-school program, and these are the people who really care about our speaker series. You can segment in a million different ways, and the catalog's got great trainings on that. But the point being, as you're thinking about your strategy now, think about who needs your personal outreach, and then how can you try to get as personal as possible with your greater community by kind of breaking them down into a few smaller segments that you can speak more personally to that group. And then when and how will this all happen? Put together a calendar, lay it out, call out where you'll be making specific solicitations, back to that donor cycle. Where is your ask happening? Don't get stuck on only cultivating and forget that you've never asked people to give yet. And lay it all out so you can then kind of have your marching orders toward your finish line. So that's my point on process is strategy without process is a little more than a wish list. Don't let everything I just shared today be only a list. Write down a few things, even if it's one or two things, and then put a plan together to give it a try. So I know because of our fumble at the beginning in particular, we don't have many time for questions right now, maybe 1 minute. But are there any other questions, Laura, that I didn't get to that were already asked?
Let's see here. Oh, someone just asked the general group if anyone has affordable resources for mailings. I'd love to hear about that.
I have a great local printer that I find to be very affordable that I'm happy to pass on as a resource as well. It's called ColorNet, and I can, if whoever asked that question wants to email me, I can give you a contact name there. And yeah, after doing a lot of comparison, I find them to be very, very reasonably priced and probably cheaper than trying to do a large mailing from your home printer by far. And I see Sarah put in the chat, I have the chat up now, Vistaprint's a good resource for postcards, absolutely. And nobody should ever order something on Vistaprint without a coupon. Always Google Vistaprint coupon. They're always out there for everyone. Great. Well, I know that there's more sessions to get to, so I won't keep you. But thank you all for joining, and thank you for being flexible with our tech issues at the beginning. I appreciate it. And please, if there are questions I didn't get to because of our crunch time, please feel free to send me an email. I'm happy to help point you to ideas and hear your ideas and resources and all of that. So thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, Loree. And our next session's at 12, so we have a 30-minute break here. And yeah, thanks everyone for bearing with us. And we'll see you all soon.
Thank you.